Hi everyone, thank you for joining in on the webinar today. I'm going to go over a few slides and then pass over to Dana. Today's webinar is Creating Responsive Drupal Sites with Zen Grids and the Z5 theme with Dana, Demet and John Wilkins from Palantir.
Hi everybody, I'm Dana Demet. I'm the business manager here at Palantir.net, and I'm here today obviously with John Wilkins. He's one of our senior Drupal developers and themers. Palantir.net is a full-service web strategy, design, and development firm that was founded back in 1996. We've been working with Drupal since 2006. Our team is made up of about 24 or so web design, development, and Drupal experts. We specialize in open source technologies to develop sophisticated solutions that help people share information online in new and pretty exciting ways. We're also very involved in the Drupal community, the Drupal Association, and DrupalCons. And we're also an Enterprise Select Acquia partner. Our team also includes some of the leading contributors to Drupal 7 core, and we also have a number of folks who are leading core development initiatives for Drupal 8. On top of that, many of our team members are responsible for maintaining or co-maintaining some of the most widely used Drupal contributed modules. We're currently looking for Drupal developers as well as Acquia and engineers to join the Palantir team. So if you're looking for a new challenge, definitely contact us as soon as you can. At Palantir, we've been focusing on developing mobile-first solutions for our clients for the last couple of years now. This has included the development of both dedicated mobile apps for iOS and Android devices, dedicated mobile and adaptive websites, and of course, responsive designs. While we recognize that a responsive design approach isn't always the best for every situation, we've definitely found that it is ideal for many of the clients who we work with, who are looking for a robust and sustainable solution that's as future-proofed as possible. The way that people interact with websites is changing very rapidly. It's been estimated that within 3 years, the majority of us will use mobile devices, such as smartphones, tablets, and e-readers, to access information online, while a sizable minority will continue to use desktops and laptops for many years. In this rapidly changing ecosystem, what's required is an approach that focuses on the needs of the user rather than the capabilities and features of their device. That's one of the reasons that Palantir has provided support for the development of the Zen base theme and the Zen Grids project. What you see today in Zen 5 is the result of a year's worth of work over several projects, including our own responsive site, which coincidentally was recognized by a responsive design pioneer, Ethan Marcotte, as one of his 20 favorites, and the responsive sites we're currently building for the University of Michigan Medical School. We like to use Zen and Zen Grids because it enables us to build sustainable, best practices-driven sites that focus on the needs of the user, using the most current and standards-compliant tools and techniques. With all that information, I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to take you over Zen and responsive web design.
Hello, everybody. I'm Albin Wilkins, and I'm actually really excited to be talking today. I wrote all new slides just for this presentation, currently I'm the Drupal 8 mobile initiative lead, which means I'm sort of rounding up and helping people get coordinated around adding mobile solutions, including responsive design, to Drupal 8. It's pretty exciting, but the thing I want to talk about today is things you can do right now in Drupal 7. And that's using Zen and the Zen Grids system. The Drupal Zen theme has been around for a while. Actually, over 700,000 downloads, which I actually just saw that download statistic recently, and it's pretty humbling. It's really amazing that makes people taking a look at the project. And obviously, you can download it from Drupal.org /project/Zen. The Zen 7.x 5.0 release is actually the 5th major release. Those of you who've been keeping track of Zen releases may have noticed that we skipped version 4, but that's just because I when I ported Zen from Drupal 5 to Drupal 6, I thought it was going to be a straight port, and it turned out to be a major overhaul of the system because the theming system was so different than Drupal 6. And I sort of forgot to bump the version number up when I ported to Drupal 6. So I'm just basically catching up from that being behind by one. So yeah, Zen 5 is the 5th major release. And I started out just trying to add HTML5 features to Zen, and what ended up happening was that I got a whole lot of other great best practices into the new Zen 5 theme, including Normalize, Respond, Zen Grids, Faceted Compass, Responsive Design, of course, as well as accessibility, things like ARIA, and RTL language support is all in there. So there are a lot of really great things about this about this new release, and you can read more about all those different features on the project homepage. One of the things that I noticed once I tried porting Zen to HTML5 is that Drupal themes can't really alter the markup that you need for a good HTML5 website because the theme level just doesn't know about the semantics of your actual content. Of course, Drupal is a system that allows you to create content types and add fields to those content types. And that's all done through the configuration of Drupal, and the theme system really doesn't understand anything about all of those different fields. All it knows is that they're text areas or text fields, but it doesn't know what HTML5 element it should be using. And it's the HTML5 element that really makes a nice semantic markup. So while I was developing the Zen 5 theme, I got together with some really smart people at Palantir, and we wrote the fences module specifically to address the markup of Drupal's fields module. The default markup that Drupal 7 provides for a field is kind of the worst case scenario in that it assumes that you're going to have a multi-value field with no markup of its own, like a plain text multi-value field with a label. And that's an edge case, but that's what Drupal 7 sort of assumes, and it provides all the markup you need for that edge case. Whereas Fences sort of does the opposite. It assumes that most of your elements are going to have markup inside them already. They just need a sort of a single wrapper element around it. And you can see that Drupal 7 with Fences provides a much leaner semantic markup for your content. So we really like to start when we're building the sites to make sure the fence is installed and configure each of our fields to use the right semantic markup. So when we're building a responsive Drupal site, basically we're configuring Drupal fields with fences. Then we build a Zen subtheme and then design our layouts with Zen grids and Fast. And that's basically, those are the things we're going to be talking about today. Oh yeah, this is probably the most boring slide, so I added a picture here, so it's not quite as boring. Now, the guiding principle behind Zen has always been that it makes no assumptions about your content design. And it does the most minimally useful thing for all designs, and then gets the hell out of your way. Basically, what this means is that we don't know your users. We don't know your content, but there are a lot of best practices and good development practices that you should be following. And Zen will help you to do those things. And on those places where people may honestly disagree about the right approach of things, Zen makes sure that it provides a sensible default that's really easy to override. So you can swap out Zen's default principles or default implementation of anything and replace it with your own. For example, the normalize.css file is now included with Zen. Normalize is an interesting project in that it's instead of resetting all of your HTML elements to with a really overzealous, in my opinion, selector and reset styles that remove all margins and padding and bold and everything. It removes all styling from all elements, and instead normalize.css. Let's make the default styling consistent across browsers. So it adds sort of a light sprinkling of markup to a select group of CSS or HTML elements in order to provide consistent styling. And then one of the best ways you can normalize then is to edit that file directly, and basically, instead of resetting your styles, you're setting your styles inside the normalize.css file. So you're setting sort of your standards, right? So again, this is just a single file, so it's really easy to rip that out and replace it with if you prefer an HTML reset, you can certainly do that, and the rest of them will continue to work just as normal. So that's been a sort of guiding principle behind it, and it will continue to be that way. Lean semantic HTML5 markup. The new Zen has gone through all of the relevant template files and really removed a lot of the wrap divs that is in sort of the default installation of Drupal 7. And it also provides a sort of a flexible, lightweight, responsive framework. And it does this with the meta tags and some supporting libraries, which I'll show you in a second, as well as the Sass and Compass. So when you start to build a subtheme of Zen, which is definitely the recommended way to use Zen, there's documentation which you can find on the Zen project page, which lists all the 5 or 6 steps that you need to do in order to take the starter kit folder, which is included with the Zen theme, and copy that to your new spot on your site and modify it to be your new subtheme. Alternatively, you can use Drush. Drush and Zen go together quite well. You can download Zen, clear the cache, and then as soon as you do that, the Drush-specific Zen commands are now available. You don't even have to enable Zen. You can just start creating subthemes using Drush. So Drush Zen, and then in quotes, my first subtheme, and then sort of the machine name of your subtheme. We're going to just choose first in this example, and then description. And then my favorite thing is this -- without RTL flag, because that, while RTL is a great feature if you need it, it does sort of double the number of CSS files and adds a whole bunch of comments all inside the CSS files. Let's say LTR. The -- without RTL will strip out all of those extra files and all of those comments, so you no longer have to see them. That's quite nice. And then when you do that, it just goes and creates a new subtheme for you. It does all the steps automatically for you, and puts it in sites all themes, whatever the machine name was. That's really, really handy. Once you've built your subtheme, you of course can go to admin appearance and then enable it and make it default. And then you can edit the settings. Now, the settings on some themes are quite extensive. I was actually one of the developers who helped make the theme settings available and working in Drupal 6 and Drupal 7, and I'm happy to see developers continue to improve and create interesting settings inside their themes. But Zen really takes sort of a minimalist approach to the settings page. There are just sort of a handful of settings. And the idea here is that probably you don't need that many settings usually, because when you're building a website, you know exactly the type of theme that you want, and instead of adding a bunch of settings, you can simply just sort of write your subtheme to do that thing rather than have an option to do it or not do it. The few things that it does do is it adds an easy way for you to turn on or off some of the responsive and mobile-first things that every single theme needs. Zen 5 comes with respond.js as well as the HTML5 shiv. Now, if you want to use Modernizer on your site, which is it's a great script, you have to, of course, build a custom Modernizer script so that you're getting exactly the feature tests that you want within Modernizer. And then you can add that to your theme. But when you do that, of course, you don't want respond.js on there because Modernizer has its own sort of version of that. So you can simply go to your subtheme and turn off respond.js, and it won't add that and sort of conflict with the Modernizer. Also, if you decide that you don't want to build a responsive site, you can simply turn off the meta tags that are necessary in order to get responsive designs to look right on mobile devices. So that's a really really flexible way to toggle those different features. And there are just a handful of these things in the settings. So go ahead and take a look at it and see. You'll find a few interesting things there, but not an overwhelming number of things. So at DrupalCon Denver, I gave a presentation on rethinking responsive design techniques. And if you go to denver2012.drupal.org, you can find a video for that, which is it talks on some of the same subjects, but it also delves into my sort of responsive building techniques, which we won't be covering. But instead, we're going to be talking about sort of some of the really useful patterns and techniques in responsive design that are really essential to building responsive design in a smart and sensible way. Of course, we'll also be talking about Zen grids here. One of the first things that I think is useful is that, of course, media queries are part of the responsive design technology that you have to use. And finding the right breakpoints inside your design is really critical. One of the problems that people have encountered is that they got sort of stuck in the mindset of, okay, I'm supporting these desktop screen sizes, which are 960 and 1200, and when we went to mobile devices, we started thinking about those device sizes, 320 and 768, and that was not a really wise decision on our part. And really, you don't ever want to use a breakpoint that is a well-known device size width, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What you'll find is that some apps on mobile devices will actually add a little bit of Chrome, so they'll actually cut off some of the pixels within the viewport. And if you're viewing a website within like a Twitter app, you may actually see a completely different layout because you set your breakpoint at the device size, and yet the viewport is slightly smaller than the device size now. So finding those, the way you actually find breakpoints is basically you find the sort of natural spot in your design where those breakpoints should be. And how do you do that? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward because the breakpoints is basically are near the points in your design where your design breaks, right? So if we start with a mobile design and a small viewport width, and if we sort of increase the size gradually and make it wider and wider and wider until we get to a spot where we're like, you know what? This design doesn't look good anymore. I think I need to transition to a new design. So right at that spot where you think it looks bad, sort of just shrink it a little bit until it looks good again, and then pick that as your breakpoint. Because you wanted the breakpoints to be a transition from a good design to another good design, right? But you want it to be relatively near, a spot where the design breaks. So you just sort of use this technique of sort of gradually increasing, finding the spot where it looks, and then sort of backing up until it looks good. That's how you progressively increase the size of your site until you've built up a sort of natural set of breakpoints that make your site look really good at any single device size that's possible. And one of the interesting things that you end up with, as this blog post from Patrick Grady, designer at Palantir, posted, is that you end up sort of inverting where your breakpoints are, because instead of breakpoint being at like 320 where the iPhone is, you find that 320 is sort of like in the middle of the spectrum of, so it's sort of in between your natural breakpoints, and your natural breakpoints are at spots in between all of the device spots that we had been traditionally thinking about. So I think this is a really great approach, using natural breakpoints, and I really recommend using that approach as well. The other thing that I would like to talk about is percentage-based gutters. This is actually one of the boring slides with bullet points, but fortunately, I've actually only got one bullet point, which is that they suck. And the reason why percentage-based gutters suck so much is because gutters, of course, are the space in between your grid columns, and using sort of standard CSS technologies, you have to, since we're using a flexible grid, we have to use percentages for our column widths, and using standard CSS techniques, that usually means that we need to use percentages for our gutters, the margins in between the columns. And what we discover when we do that is that, if we want to have sort of a consistent gutter size, like let's say of 2 M's, 600 pixels at 5% gutter equals approximately 2 M's or 30 pixels. And if we still want to have 30 pixels at 900 pixel size, we actually have to shrink the gutter size to 3.3333%. And basically, we end up having to create a whole bunch of breakpoints just to get consistent gutter sizes. And not only do we have to change the gutter size at those breakpoints, we have to recalculate all of our column widths as well. This is just a real pain in the butt. And fortunately, there's no good reason that we have to continue using that. And that's because there is a widely supported CSS property called box sizing. And with setting box sizing, we'll change the CSS box model. So traditionally, if you look at the graphic here, our CSS box model says that when you have a white dotted box here, which has a specific width, and you add padding and borders, that padding and borders is outside the width. When you set box sizing equals border box, suddenly the padding and the borders are internal to the width. And of course, this makes a lot more sense than the traditional CSS box model. If we have a box and we decide to add some padding to it, it makes no sense that the box would get bigger because we added padding. Physical boxes don't act that way, and our CSS boxes really shouldn't either. That's why I like box sizing border box, because you're then able to set your gutter using padding. You don't have to use percentages anymore. You can use M's or pix, and you have a very consistent gutter width because you just use 2 M's, and it's always 2 M's, no matter what media query, no matter what breakpoint span that you're in. And Paul Ayers talks about this this box sizing CSS property in his blog post. Incidentally, this was also Patrick Grady who pointed this out to me a couple months before FileArch posted this blog post. And this pretty much changed my life. Because without it, the Zen grid, which I'll talk about later, isn't possible. So, how do we go about building different layouts in Drupal? The obvious layout method is to use region-based layouts. And basically, if you look at this diagram here on the right-hand side, that's sort of the traditional Drupal layout with left sidebar, content, and right sidebar. And doing your region-based responsive layouts means that as the viewport, which is a black box here, shrinks in size, the regions just sort of rearrange themselves. So the right sidebar drops down to be below the left sidebar in the content div. And then as it shrinks even more, then the left sidebar drops down as well. This is the way that Start in Drupal 8 will work. And incidentally, is the default layout file that's given with Zen 5 as well. The problem with the obvious method here of region-based layouts is that it's kind of boring because this is really obvious. Everybody's going to use these layout methods. It sort of makes your responsive design slightly cookie-cutter-ish and not very unique. So at Palantir, we decided to try a completely different technique when we designed our Palantir.net website. And that was to use field-based layouts. So basically, each field on a particular, like a content page, becomes a grid item inside our flexible grid. So this is a screenshot of, or a partial screenshot of the one of our experience content types, which is at the Palantir.net/experience, and this is a portfolio page. And basically, it has a large image across the top, and then it has a body text, and then it has a highlights text field and a theme text field, which is I think it's a user reference field or one of the new Drupal 7 reference modules. And basically, each of the fields then become one of the things that you actually position and place on your flexible grid. I really like this method because it makes each of your content types. You can use a unique layout for each of them, one that works great for that content. And the only reason why Zen 5 doesn't come with a layout like this, of course, is because we don't know what your content types are going to look like. So I provide a default region-based layout file, but honestly, you should throw it away and build your own. And that's what I'm going to be showing you how to build your own using Zen grids. Now, Zen grid is actually a separate project from the Zen theme, so that's why we talk about the Zen theme and Zen grids. The Zen theme has been around a long time. The Zen grids project is pretty new. I wrote it over Christmas break, and started writing it over Christmas break, finished it up earlier this year, and released it just before the release of Zen 5 this spring. So you can actually use each of these things independently of each other. If you use Zen, you don't have to use Zen Grid. And if you want to use Zen Grid, you don't have to use the Zen theme. You don't even have to use Drupal if you want to use Zen Grid. So they really truly are separate independent projects. But the Zen theme comes with Zen Grid included with it. So you don't have to separately download the Zen grids. It's inside sort of the download file of the Zen theme. So there's not a separate installation for that. Now, I did mention that the Zen grids is a SAS and Compass project. Forgot about this slide. Yeah, ZenGrids is a separate project. ZenGrids.com is where you can find more information about everything about ZenGrids. There is a help page which documents all of the different. It's an API documentation for all of the different mixins and variables that are provided with ZenGrids. But what exactly, why did I create this separate project using SAS and Compass? I'm sure that most of you have heard about SAS. It's a CSS preprocessor, which basically means you write a file, you write your CSS using SAS syntax, and then it will, there's a utility that will convert that SAS file into a regular CSS file. It basically compiles your SAS files into regular CSS, and then sort of use SAS regularly within Drupal or any other kind of website. So why did I think that it was necessary in order to start using SAS and Compass and build this entirely separate ZenGrids project to do layouts when other themes within Drupal have decided to do layouts using other techniques? And that's because writing the raw layout CSS, it's really hard. If you looked at previous versions of Zen, it used a method called Zen columns, which is really well field tested, but it is complex. You have to be really careful with your math when you're editing the files, and it's easy to accidentally break because of the math is really sort of sensitive to minor miscalculations. So writing a single layout just using raw CSS, it's hard. That's why people developed, the 960 grid system. That's why they developed grid systems, because it provided an abstraction layer, a way to simplify creating layouts, right? Writing 3 to 5 separate layouts for a responsive design, because each media query basically means it's a different layout. That just becomes really, really hard using raw CSS, and I recognized that it was no longer made any sense to try to use Zen columns, this sort of CSS technique to build layout files. It just no longer made sense. It was way too difficult, even for me. Fortunately, SAS makes this much easier. But you don't have to be afraid of SAS, because SAS it's just CSS syntax plus some extra stuff, some extra awesome sauce. So if you take a CSS file and rename it from .css to .scss, you've made a valid SAS file now, because SAS just takes the CSS syntax and sort of extends it a little bit. And I really believe that learning SAS will save you time immediately. We first tried out SAS within Palantir over a year ago, and basically, I said to my fellow developers, I said, let's try this. We haven't really studied it or tried to learn it. Let's just try using it on this project, and because it just sort of generates raw CSS, and if we completely screw it up, we can just throw away our SAS files and keep using the CSS files that it generates. So we decided to go with that, and it saved us time immediately. And I believe that there are certain SAS and techniques that you can use that within a single project, if you use those techniques, you'll save all the time that you had to use to learn SAS within the same project. So you'll actually use less time developing all of your CSS if you learn Sass while you write it. So let's do Sass in 2 minutes here, and then we can talk about then grid. So Sass, it has several different feature sets, but two of the easiest ones are variables. This is one of the things that I've wanted in CSS forever, right? So you can set a variable and then just use that variable name repeatedly throughout your Sass file. And here we have an example of setting the blue variable to this specific color here, and then we're using it multiple times in our Sass file, which is the first 6 lines here. And then underneath the arrow, basically it takes that Sass file and generates the CSS below. And you can see that it's inserted the actual sort of raw variable or raw value into all the spots where the variable was. It's very straightforward. Mixins are a really, really useful thing. Here's an example mixin. And basically what mixins do is it allows you to apply a group of CSS properties using a single line of Sass code. So instead of, it allows you to take, anywhere from here, in this example, just 2 lines of CSS properties, onto sort of an infinite number of CSS properties, onto any CSS selector that you want with just using a single line. So great savings in writing your code, and of course there's good code reuse. So here we've written a mixin that just does left, and you provided a parameter of distance, and basically what it will do is it'll float that element to the left and move it away from that left edge by the distance that you specify. So here we're going to apply it to the dot picture selector, and then we just call that mixin using @include left, and then the value that we want is 10 pixels. And I should say at the very beginning here that @mixin, that's how you define your mixin. So you can create your own mixins. We created this left mixin, and now we're going to use it here with the @include left. And then when Sass generates the raw CSS, you can see it just goes and adds float left and margin left to the picture selector. So we've written 1 line of Sass, and it's generated all the lines of CSS. And so the way that we use Sass within Palantir is, we write all of our styles using Sass, and then have a Sass utility to generate the CSS sort of on the fly as we write Sass, and then deploy the CSS. Now, this sounds like it's more steps, but it actually isn't. All of these Sass utilities will basically, you'll set them, you say, hey, watch this folder of Sass files. And as soon as you see me save a change to that Sass file, immediately generate a CSS file. So you save your Sass file, and immediately you have the generated CSS. So you can deploy the CSS however you want. I like to work locally. Some people use MAMP to work locally, and so you're literally just editing your Sass files, saving, then going into the browser and reloading, because the CSS is already ready for Drupal to pull that in the normal ways. You can learn more about Sass's features at sass-lang.com. I want to talk about Compass. And when people talk about Sass, they talk about Compass at the same time, and there's a really good reason for that. Compass is basically, it's a library of predefined Sass mixins. And basically, the mixin idea is really powerful, but if you have a community of developers who are writing mixins and sharing them, that's an even more powerful idea. And Compass is a library that includes a whole bunch of really useful things, including CSS3 mixins. With CSS3 mixins, you never have to mess with vendor prefixes ever again. Your box shadow, you don't have to remember which vendor prefix do I have to use for box shadow, or which vendor prefix do I need to use for animation and all that stuff. You just use a single line of SAS, which calls a compass mixin, and it'll write all of the vendor prefixes for you automatically. Super handy. That alone will save you tons of time. You no longer have to go and look up on, like, can I use, or HTML5 please, or wherever you're looking to find out about vendor prefixes. So don't have to do any more research. Just use Compass, and it'll write the right vendor prefixes for you. It also provides a vertical rhythm helper mixin, which Zen5 includes in order to do some nice vertical rhythms, since it can be tricky to do that using raw CSS. It also provides some standardized IE legacy variables. You can turn on or off support of IE 6, 7, and 8 with a single variable. So like you said, legacy support for IE 6, to false or true or whatever. This is becoming really useful because we had a client who said, oh, by the way, didn't we tell you our CEO uses IE 7? Well, we were able to fix a lot of the issues that we had with IE 7 simply by turning legacy support for IE 7 back to true. And that fixed a lot of the issues that we had already, and then there was sort of a little bit of cleanup. It was a much easier job of adding in that support for IE 7 so late in the project. It also provides some mixins for image sprite generation, which are really super time savers. You don't have to do all of your sprite generations in Photoshop or what have you, and do a whole bunch of calculations and measurements in order to find the right spot in order to add that to your CSS. And because Compass is so great and has all this other stuff in it, ZenGrids requires Compass. Now, what exactly is ZenGrids? ZenGrids is another library of predefined SAS mixins. It's just like Compass, except that it's only for doing layouts. So it reuses some of the legacy IE variables, which is why it requires Compass. So that's why when people talk about SAS, they say you should install Compass at the same time, because it's just such a great feature set. One of the sort of bugaboos that people have about SAS is they think it requires Ruby, and this is simply not true. SAS and Compass are written in Ruby, but I'm not a Ruby developer. I don't know anything about Ruby. I wrote ZenGrids using SAS's syntax. I don't know anything about Ruby. You don't have to learn Ruby. The only thing is if you're installing SAS or Compass from the command line, that simply means that you have to have Ruby installed on your machine. That's the only thing about Ruby. So first we're going to talk about command line junkies. Installing Compass in SAS, you can do that for free. Just go to the URL I provided here on saslearn.com. And the hardest part might be getting Ruby installed on your system if you're a Windows user. Mac OS 10, that's already on there. But then you still have to go into the command line and sort of type gem install Compass. And you just might not want to do that. So if instead you don't like going to the command line, there's a $14 app, Fire app, which is great, and it has SAS and Compass sort of bundled inside the app, so you just have to run the Fire app, and you have SAS and Compass installed in your system. The other question that people have is, do I need to install SAS and Compass on my server? And the answer is absolutely not, because these are tools for developing CSS, so they should be tools on your development systems, like on your laptop. So you install Compass with SAS there, generates your CSS, and then you're just copying the CSS files from your development environment up to your staging, production, what have you. So here, now we're going to talk about ZenGrids. I'm going to try to share my desktop here and show you how ZenGrids actually works. Okay, that looks like it's going well. Let's go over to zengrids.com. This is where you can learn all about ZenGrids' syntax and its mixins. And it, of course, is a responsive site as well. It'd be pretty silly to have a system that allowed you to create responsive layouts that wasn't responsive itself. So the first part of it here is my sort of manifesto of why I think you have to write responsive sites using Sass and Compass. But let's jump straight into using Zen grids. I've given some example. Let's see if I can do this here. Yeah. I've given some example markup. And this is pretty basic markup where we just have a sort of wrapper, a container div, and then we have a bunch of sort of HTML5 elements, articles, and asides and stuff. And we're going to position each of these items inside our grid. But you can see that there's nothing special about this markup. That's why I'm showing it to you. ZenGrid doesn't require any special markup. I would say the only requirement is that you'd be able to, have a sort of custom class for each of the things that you want to position inside your layouts, which we have here. So when we're writing our Sass file, the first thing we're going to do is add imports. Add imports is similar to the CSS add imports. The difference here is that basically you're telling Sass to import all of the mixins for ZenGrids using the add import Zen. And then we're just going to set a couple of variables here. Set the number of columns in our flexible grid to 7 and set the gutter width to 10 pixels. And here, let me show you. This is the layout that we're actually going to be creating here. As you can see, it's a 7-column grid, and then we're just going to position those 5 different grid items inside our grid. There's basically just there's like 4 or 5 things that you have to learn for ZenGrids, and I've already taught you 3 of them. Those 2 variables and the add import. The next one here is the ZenGrid container mixin. This basically just adds some standardized CSS properties to the wrapper that contains all of your grid items. And you can actually use the body element as your container. There's no requirement that it has to be a div. It can literally be the body, and then just position all of the items inside the body as grid items. And then the ZenGrid item mixin. This is how you're going to actually apply and position each of your grid items. So this first aside, we're going to position inside our grid using this @include ZenGrid item 2, 1. Now, what do those parameters mean there, 2, 1? It's really quite basic. Here is the content. This is the content element, and we are going to position it inside our grid using @include ZenGrid item 4, 3. And that 4, that first parameter, says make this grid item span 4 columns. So we want it to be 4 columns wide. And then the 3, the second second parameter here is position this grid item in the 3rd column. So literally, if you're sort of reading this as if it was English, it's make a Zen grid item that's 4 columns wide, starting in the 3rd column from the left. And if we go down and look at the output here, you can see that that's exactly how the content is being positioned. It's starting in the 3rd column as we've counted from left to right, and we're making it span 4 items. So it's in the 3, 4, 5th, and 6th columns. And we're just doing the same thing here. You can see that our second aside, which is our right sidebar, we're positioning this grid item, we're saying make it 1 column wide and positioned in the 7th column from the left. Include then grid item 1, 7. So 1 column wide, 7th column from the left. Let's look at this again here. So we've taken our side 1 and put it, again, 2 columns wide, starting in the 1st column. Our content div, which is 4 columns wide, starting in the 3rd column. And then our side 2, which is 1 column wide, starting in the 7th column. And this is all the SAS markup we need in order to create this layout. We're also going to take a look at one other thing here. How do you create new rows, right? So aside 1 content and aside 2, that's all in 1 row. But we'd like to put our 2 footer elements in the 2nd row, beneath the 1st row. And the way that we do that is pretty easy. Since we're using floats as the actual sort of layout technique underneath, we're going to simply do a then clear on our 1st footer, and that will start a new row. So it'll appear below everything in the previous row. Footer 1 is the 1st element in our HTML markup, but because then grids is very powerful, you can actually rearrange things within that row. So our 2nd footer, which is actually the 2nd element in the HTML source, after footer 1, I should say, is positioned to the left because we told it to be positioned in the 1st column. So footer 1 is positioned starting in the 5th column, and footer 2 is positioned in the 1st column. So we've switched the visual ordering of this simply by using the proper placement parameter here. So which column do we want this grid item to be positioned in? So that's basically almost everything you have to learn for Zen grids. At import, you set the variables for the column count and the column width, and set the Zen grid container for the single container that you need for all of your grid items, and then just start positioning all of your grid items using the Zen grid item. And then lastly, Zen clear to start a new row. Let's go and, congratulations, you just learned all the basics of Zen grids, which is true. It only took us about 10 minutes to do that. But let's go ahead and pop open an actual Zen theme, subtheme. This is a subtheme that I created using Drush earlier this evening, about 2 hours ago, and then I used DevelopMindful to generate some content, put some things into the right sidebar, left sidebar here, and when you open up here, I called it Taipei. Taipei is actually the city where I live in Taiwan, and it's actually 9 o'clock at night here now. If you take a look at your subtheme that you created, you'll see a whole bunch of different folders here. The config.rb file is an interesting file, which I'll talk about in just a second. But the SAS, these are all the sort of SAS files, and the layout file that then uses by default, which again I recommend you sort of run away and build your own, is a responsive sidebar. And that's this file right here. So the first thing that I'm doing here is setting the column count to be 5, gutter width to be 20 pixels. And let's go down here. We're adding a Zen grid container here. These are the 3 sort of wrappers that we're using inside this particular layout. And let's go over to our first media query. Our default media query should just be when I say a default media query, the styles that we use outside of media queries should be the mobile layout, which is single column, basically no layout on any of our grid items, because we want it to appear in the same order that it appears in the HTML source in a single column. But let's look at sort of the and you know I've not used the right breakpoints. Definitely 480 is sort of the size of the iPhone in landscape mode. But again, I don't know anything about your content, so I can't pick the right breakpoints. So if we look at this, these are slightly larger than the phone, because it's 48 pixels through 960 or 959 actually. I'm gonna set the then column count to 3. So I basically want to create a layout that only has 3 grid columns in it. And we can, our content item, we want it to be 2 columns wide, starting in the second column. So that means it's basically going to be spanning the second and third column from the left, so the column in the middle and the column on the right. And then our first sidebar will be 1 column wide, starting in the first column, because of course we want it on the left. And then our right sidebar, we actually want it to be below our first sidebar and the content region. So we add that then clear to create a new row. And we're actually going to have it span the entire width of our grid, so 3 columns wide, starting in the first column. And the way that I get this CSS file right here to be generated into a CSS file, which is right here, is by using this little Fire app, which is up here, which I installed a little while ago, and I'm going to tell it to watch a specific folder, watch the Taipei folder. So basically, I'm going to point this application at the sort of root folder of my subtheme, and it's actually going to go and read some configuration information from this config.rb, and so it'll know how I want it to generate the CSS. And what do you know? I'm getting an error. Live demos. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna go straight to my my backup, which is using command line. That normally works just great. I'm not sure what's going on there, so we'll go over to the command line. I'm inside my Taipei root, and then you can tell it Compass Watch. We use the command line equivalent of the Fire app. And all I have to do is type this one utility, and it's going to start watching the SAS subfolder here, and anytime it sees me make a change, it'll generate the CSS file. So let's prove that. I'm going to go over here and make a very trivial change, just add a single line, hit save, and now let's go back over to our terminal, and you can see that it is already overwritten the CSS file and generated a new CSS file automatically. Let's take a look at that 3-column layout that we wanted for the small sizes. So here you can see our left sidebar is over here. Our main content is these 2 columns on the right. And if we scroll down, our right sidebar is now in a new row down here. All of that CSS was generated on the fly. Here again, I can even reload if you didn't believe me that this actually did create new CSS. And there's that second sidebar down at the bottom. Let's go ahead and do something slightly more drastic so you can see how easy this is. Let's switch the positioning of this sidebar and this content. So we're going to stick with 3 columns wide, but let's move our main content from the second column from the left to the first column to the left, and then move our sidebar, first sidebar, from the first column over to the third column. I'm going to hit save, and then jump over to the terminal just to make sure. Yep, there it overwrote the CSS file. And let's jump back over to here and hit reload. in live demo, so it makes me sweat. Yay, it works! So our content is now on the left, and our sidebar is on the right. Like I said, the actual layout, see that if you look at this main is basically the wrapper that we're using, the container, and here is the source order, so our content comes first, and then here's the first sidebar. It comes after the content. So we're able to rearrange things using Zen grids, using really, really simple syntax. I mean, you can't get much simpler than just sort of changing the column number that you want it to go in. There are more wonderful things you can learn. Oh, one thing I would say is that as on each of your media queries, you'll be wanting to change the Zen column count inside each one of those media queries because you'll naturally want more columns available to you for doing layout as the viewport is larger. So down here, using the larger 960 and above media query, we're setting it to 5 columns wide. So then we're now positioning things using a 5 columns that's sort of kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the left side. So that is basically it. There is a lot of really awesome things about Zen grids that I haven't talked about. You just simply don't have enough time. But I want to thank you so much, and I would love to open up to questions.
Hi, John. Thank you very much for the presentation. We do have a couple of questions. The first one's from Gareth Alexander. He asked, is there any advice you can give to themers upgrading a theme from using a previous version of Zen as a base theme to using Zen 5 as a base theme, or is it best to treat it as a brand new theme?
Every time there's a major update of Zen, within that major version, I try to only do bug fixes and sort of small changes because I don't want to break everybody's sites, right? But when I do a new major version, that's when I need to improve all the best practices, get them up to date. So upgrading from one major version to another major version, it's a big change. And I would say that there's two sort of use cases. One, you have an existing site. They're already on Drupal 7. Let's say they're using Zen 7.x 3.0 as their base theme. If you're using that as your base theme, there's really no reason why you need to upgrade to Zen 5. That your theme works great now. I would recommend not upgrading to Zen 5. Zen 3 will continue to be supported. Just keep using Zen 3. If, on the other hand, the theme that you're wanting to upgrade, like you need to rewrite it to be a new responsive site, like it wasn't previously responsive, then yeah, you're basically already going to be doing a rewrite. So I would say you kind of have to tackle it as a rewrite. There's not a whole there's not an easy way to do that because making your site responsive requires a sort of rewrite of your content strategy and thinking about your layouts and your design all over again anyway. Upgrading to Zen 5 is just part of that process.
Okay. And William Robinson asked, can I use this Zen and HTML5 with Open Atrium?
With Open Atrium, I haven't been following Open Atrium. As long as Open Atrium has been upgraded to Drupal 7, then I don't see why you can't use Zen 5 with Open Atrium. The thing the course that I would point out is that Zen basically has, as you saw from when I was doing screen sharing, it has really no design of itself. It has the minimalist CSS that you need for any site, but I don't want you to have to go through and like undo styling just to add your own styling. So it has no sort of styles of its own. So yes, you can create your own sub-theme for Open Atrium, but I wouldn't recommend using them raw, the base theme itself, by itself, with any site actually.
Okay, sure. And Randy Steele asked if you are able to compare the Zen and Omega themes.
Sure. Omega themes, they have decided to sort of fully embrace the theme settings that are available with Drupal 6 and Drupal 7, and you can basically configure your layouts and your breakpoints within the settings page. That makes building those layouts really easy. The reason why Zen doesn't go that way is because we feel like when you're building layouts, it's really you're crafting it for your specific design, and Zen Grids makes it really easy to. It makes it really easy just using Sass to write some simple Sass lines using the Zen Grids mixins and create really customized, wonderful layouts. And you're getting your hands dirty a little bit more, working within Sass and CSS, and really that's going to provide the most optimized experience for your end users because they're not relying on PHP settings and sort of conditionally doing certain things depending on PHP, because you've written very specific CSS, very optimized CSS that is just loaded all the time, and you let media queries be media queries. I would say that's sort of the biggest difference. And I haven't investigated Omega theme super thoroughly, so I don't want to mischaracterize anything that I don't quite understand about Omega. So I'm just gonna remain silent. I think they might be using some JavaScript to change class names depending on the media width, but I'm not certain. And using CS, let me just say, I'm not sure if Omega does this, but there are some people who use JS in order to change selectors, CSS class names, in order to alter the layout depending on the viewport width. I think using JS to do layout is a bad idea because CSS already does layout. Why are you adding a dependency on JavaScript in order to do layouts? So.
Okay, and Randy would also like to know, can you use Zen Grids with all Drupal themes?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, they're completely separate projects. You can use Zen Grid. You don't even have to use it within Drupal. The zengrids.com website is just plain HTML. There's no CMS on it at all. And I'm just using Zen Grids to generate the layout CSS. So you can when you're using Sass and Compass, there's not even anything special you have to do within the theme. You just have to have the .info file load the CSS files like normal. So you're on your development environment, your laptop, whatever. You're writing your Sass, and it's automatically generating the CSS. And your Drupal theme only knows about the generated CSS, because in the .info file you're pointing at the generated CSS. So you can do that in any theme. I would say that definitely take a look at the config.rb file that comes with Zen's starter kit, because there's some really handy things in there. You can just sort of copy that one file out and use it in whatever theme you want if it doesn't have its own config.rb file.
Okay, and Brent would like to know, which Sass utility do you use?
I'm sorry, which what do I use?
Sass utility.
Oh. I have Compass Watch is a great utility for generating your SAS. SAS has its own utility. There's like SAS -- watch, and then it's this really long command line thing that you have to type, and then you have to specify where the source SAS folder is and where the destination CSS folder is, and there's a whole bunch of like options and flags you have to add to that SAS utility, which really makes it a pain to use. Compass watch that's the only command you have to type. Compass watch, that's it, and you just do it within the root of your subtheme, and it'll read all those flags and options from the config.rb file. So you basically have like a .info file, but it's for SAS options, and sort of reads all those configuration things inside that config.rb file. So you only have to type compass watch, you don't have to know any other special commands, and it'll generate CSS for you using SAS. I have been using FireApp for about a month now. I just set up this demo site and I forgot to check FireApp using it. Oh, I know why. It does it wrong. Yeah, you know what? I forgot. Right before I renamed the directory where the demo was stored, and I forgot to update FireApp to tell it that the new location that I had errored out because it was trying to look in the wrong spot completely. Yeah, that was my fault. So yeah, I've been using FireApp and it works great. And so you just have to start the app, and then it just becomes a utility inside your menu bar in Mac OS X or Windows, and I believe it works on Linux as well. It works great.
Okay, great. And Matthew Oliveira would like to know, do you add both .spss and the generated .scss files to your GIT repository?
Yes, absolutely. Using the source control like Git is really essential for any sort of development work that you do. We, at Palantir, yes, we definitely add our .scss files into Git. And then we also add the generated CSS files to Git as well. So we're adding both of those files into Git, and when we were lucky enough to deploy on production sites using Git, that's really handy because, of course, all the CSS is inside Git, and it just deploys the CSS, and Drupal will happily ignore the .scss files that are just sitting there.
Paul would like to know, you said recommend to have the SAS translated on the development machine. Are there any security issues, or is it just for keeping the server set up as simple as possible?
There's really, especially if you're using Git, there's no reason why you need to have SAS and Compass and all that installed on your server. You want to make your server so as simple as possible, absolutely. And I would recommend not running, or running as few things on your server as possible. Of course, that means you have more CPU cycles available to, Apache or whatever you have running a web server. So, yeah, I mean, use MAMP or whatever to develop locally. You have like a copy of the database for your Drupal site, and just work locally. It's much faster development too, because you're not having to constantly sort of, when I first started doing websites, I would edit my CSS, and then I would have to upload them to the server, and then wait for it to finish transferring to EFTP, and then reload in my browser, and that's just a really painful process and very slow. Whereas if you develop locally, it's much faster. So that's why I like to use SAS and Compass locally.
Okay, sure. And Paul would like to know, what is your opinion on the SASE module, and where do you think it would best be used?
Yeah, so the SASE module, let me pull this up on Drupal.org. I actually feel like there's no reason at all why this module should exist. Literally, I mean, if you're using SAS as a development tool, SAS is already generating the CSS for you, and you're just pointing your theme at CSS files, why do you have to have Drupal involved at all in SAS? Some of these modules, I think there's 2 or 3 of them. Some of them actually have a PHP version of SAS that generates the SAS into CSS, and there's just no way you can keep feature parity up with the official version of SAS, which is written in Ruby. So I just think it's not a good idea, both from adding an unneeded burden to your Drupal site, as well as you're going to end up having a slightly out-of-date version of SAS, and I don't even know how Compass works with it, because, like I said, it's a library of predefined mixins, and I'm not sure how that integrates with those SAS modules as well. So,
okay, sure.
My personal opinion is don't use them.
Okay, and Lars would like to know, is Zen compatible with UberCart e-commerce?
Absolutely, yeah. There are very few bug reports that I see in the Zen queue where they're complaining about it not being compatible with other modules. So, yep.
Okay, sure. Mladen would like to know, Omega seems like mammoth in matter of, sorry, let me look at this question again. Okay, actually, I'm going to skip that one for the moment. Brent would like to know, we have had our comps done. What is the roadmap for taking the comps and incorporating Zen 5 and Zen Grid?
I think I missed some of the words. Can you repeat the question?
What is the roadmap for taking the comps and incorporating Zen 5 and Zen Grid?
Okay. So if you have design comps, you should take a look and see. Hopefully they designed it to a grid, and then just determine what the column count is inside the comps. Figure out what the gutter widths need to be, and then just sort of start writing the SAS. Setting the appropriate variables, and then basically you need to take the comps and create sort of mini wireframes, which you can just sort of hand draw with your columns and the different blocks, and start sticking them inside the grid, the fluid grid that you created. I actually just about a week and a half ago created a worksheet which has a bunch of different column layouts on it. Like there's a 1-column layout on the left, or I should say 1-column grid on the left, and then like a 5-column and a 7, or 3-column and a 5-column and 7-column inside a single sheet. So now I can like sketch out on a piece of paper just by printing out that worksheet and sketch out how I want to arrange my blocks. And then of course it has the numbers all on the worksheet, so then I can just sort of start plugging that into actual CSS or actual SAS files and using Zen Grid.
Okay, and Corey would like to know, does Zen Grid provide any tools for dealing with images responsibly other than sprites?
So does Zen Grid provide any utilities for responsive images? No. Zen Grid is purely about creating layouts. You'll notice that it actually doesn't have any special things to deal with media queries either. When I created Zen Grid, I could tell that I felt like there was something, there is something in SAS that you could write to manage media queries, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was at the time, but it was also out of scope of what I wanted to do, which was to build layouts. So Zen Grid is only dealing with layouts. There's a new Compass library created by the ZipTech people. coding designer, at Coding Designer, and he created a SAS library called Breakpoint, and that deals with managing your breakpoints and managing your media queries. And I like the looks of it. I haven't got a chance to use it yet. So one of the nice things about Compass is that you can sort of pick the libraries that you want to use and sort of mix them together for the best feature set for you. However, getting back to images, the Zen theme does have CSS in there to deal with making sure that your images resize to fit inside your fluid grid. There's just 2 or 3 lines of CSS that you need, and that's already included with Zen. If you want to handle physically resizing the images and loading different sized files depending on the viewport, there are modules which can deal with that, and I would recommend taking a look at those. There's a few of them that are competing for sort of best feature set right now, and that's something that you simply can't do within a theme at all because it has to deal with Drupal 7's image styles. So basically, the answer is yes and no. Some of it is in Zen, and some of it can't be.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all we've got time for in terms of questions. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. I'd like to thank John and Dana for presenting. And again, the slides will be posted to SlideShare, and the recorded webinar will be posted to Acquia.com in the next 48 hours. Thank you for joining. We hope to see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.